back to Pachter Factor, fellow babies. This is Michael Pachter of YouTube and Patreon fame. And if you're a YouTube subscriber or a Patreon subscriber, you know what I was talking about. If you are neither of those, then you're getting this a week late, unless you figured out a way to link your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch Prime account. Pretty easy. There are instructions in the show description below. If you're getting it a week late, follow me on Twitter at Michael Pachter, and I will continue to impart my wisdom to you, although you'll hear about it a week later than when I said it. Okay, today's question from SIFTD from Kev Masters. Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella stated, "If it was up to me, I'd like to get rid of exclusivity on consoles." Do you think Microsoft would say something like this if it were in first place, or would it be employing the same strategy as Sony? What would happen to the industry if there were no longer console exclusives? Is it wise for Sony to pay for console timed exclusives like Final Fantasy 16 and for publishers/game developers to accept those deals? Does it make more sense for third-party publishers to release their games to as wide an audience as possible? Let's start with the last one first. Yes, widest audience possible makes the most sense. Console exclusives really started with, you used to get like third-party games like Grand Theft Auto 3 were PlayStation only. Then the economics of the business got to the point where Take-Two couldn't afford to do that anymore. So Peter Moore famously, Grand Theft Auto 4 on his tattoo, which wasn't real, but he got a big rise out of people. That was the death of console exclusives. And you've had timed exclusives, as you brought up, which interestingly used to be Call of Duty would launch, some aspect of the game a month or so before on Xbox, and then it would come on PlayStation later. And then, of course, Xbox executive Dennis Durkin went to Activision to be CFO, and instantly that flipped over to PlayStation, and they bid for the exclusive. So the difference is that Dennis knew the economics of the deal, and then went to work for Activision, and then held up Sony and got more money. But again, those are like 1 and 3 month exclusives on the drop of extra content. I mean, they weren't the actual exclusives. We didn't have very many exclusives from the West. So Final Fantasy, obviously a Japanese game. We didn't have very many exclusives from the West until we got to Spider-Man. I mean, I'd say the last 8-9 years, it's really been few Western publishers who made Sony PlayStation exclusives or Xbox exclusives. But Spider-Man surprised me. And Marvel won't quite tell you if they got paid a lot or how they did it, but they got paid a lot. And that's a big game. I mean, that's the one that I think begs your question. Does it make sense for third-party publishers to distribute the game? Spider-Man sold like 8 or 9 million units, the first one, and I think this one's going to sell like 10 or 12. And that's on PlayStation only. It would sell 6 million more, if it was on Xbox. So the crazy thing is that Disney, who's in the profit business, and Marvel, who wants to sell movies and T-shirts, they would love to sell 6 million more. I kind of think Sony paid up. I think Sony paid hundreds of millions of dollars for this exclusive. And to be honest with you, it's not all about profit. It's more about the brand. So we'll see if Marvel does that again, because they've had such success with Spider-Man that I expect that they could get Xbox to pay up. And I think what would be really interesting is make the next Spider-Man PlayStation exclusive and Game Pass exclusive, not on Xbox. So I bet they could get that, and I bet they could get that on a 3 or 4 month delay, and Microsoft would pay up for that, and Sony would have to say nothing because they're selling it on another console. But the answer is it's a bad deal for the publisher unless the console manufacturer pays up. And if the console manufacturer makes the publisher whole, bad deal for the console maker. So Sony's doing it to sell PlayStations, period. And you can't count on the next Spider-Man being a Sony exclusive. You can't count on any game being a Sony exclusive unless it's been announced. So I don't think it's a smart business move by Sony to pay for exclusives unless you have confidence that they're going to do that again and again and again. They might have to now. Once Microsoft buys Activision and Game Pass starts to get traction. It's not first party because it's a license deal that Insomniac couldn't get unless Marvel and Disney said yes. Marvel flat out told me we did the exclusive, A, because Sony paid us, but B, because we love Insomniac and knew they'd do a great job on the game, which is true. And that was the selling point by Sony. But let's look at the timing of the Insomniac purchase and the first Spider-Man. They weren't wholly owned when they were working on that game. You know that. The deal closed after they started the game. So I actually think that game morphed into a first-party exclusive after the deal. And that's another reason Sony bought Insomniac. And then once they had them, it was kind of captive and they could get them to do the second. But Sony paid up. Microsoft left. And remember, Insomniac made that Sunset Overdrive game for Xbox. So they're, and they also made their stupid future past military shooter. They made plenty of games for multi-platform, so they know how to do it. They were making Spider-Man, and I'm not sure it was a Sony exclusive until Sony decided it was going to be a Sony exclusive. Microsoft makes that call, and Microsoft could, trust me, they could license it to Respawn and do multi-platform, and they'd be perfectly happy with Respawn doing a Spider-Man game. Yeah, the Japanese stuff, first of all, the Japanese publishers are pretty much in bed with Sony, and they think of Sony as being their publisher or their console. And those games don't sell well in the West, and Microsoft only sells in the West. So those games, they aren't leaving that much on the table. So I think they can afford it, yeah. They can. And Sony cuts them a deal, but it's also part of the Sony branding in Japan. It's really important to them that they have, Capcom and Namco and Square games that that are Sony exclusive. And Nintendo the same with Bayonetta, and Platinum Games. They have all these Japanese developers that do Nintendo third-party exclusives, and it makes sense because they're really branded as fellow Japanese publishers for the Japanese audience. Some of the games obviously carry over very, very well to the West, but not most of them. Bayonetta is probably the exception. Well, Satya Nadella, I think, is speaking from the perspective that we used to get him and we don't get him anymore. So that's just sour grapes, and I'm not sure he understands it. He can wish all he wants, but if he doesn't participate in the bidding, then Sony won't pay that much. And if they don't pay that much, things will probably not be exclusive. He can pay people to not make them exclusive. He could say, I'll cut my royalty and put it on Xbox. And most publishers would do that if their profit went up. Easy to do. If you're giving away, if your sales on Xbox are going to be zero, and you want to give away half the profit on Xbox, every publisher would take that. So, Satya can fix it himself by offering better terms. But he hasn't. Thanks for joining us on Pachter Factor on SIFTD.net. We hope you are watching as a Patreon patron or as a YouTube subscriber. If you are, you're getting it real time. We also encourage you to link your Amazon Prime and Twitch Prime accounts. We get paid a couple bucks a month that costs you nothing, so please remember to do so and re-up it every time you watch. The instructions are in our show description below. If you're doing none of those things because you're too lame, have no money, or you just don't care, follow me on Twitter at Michael Pachter. You're too lame. If you're too lame to link your Prime account, you're too lame to follow me on Twitter, but I'll still be nice to you.